Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the P1 podcast, post-Japanese Grand Prix edition. Feels weird to be recording a podcast at this time in the morning, Tommy, but this will be the last time, don't worry, that we will be talking about times of recording, because the only other time it's going to be early this year is Vegas, and we are very lucky to actually be there this year, Tommy. Is that right? Have I got that right? I don't think there's any other early ones.
No, that should be for us at least. For people in Europe, yeah. Every other person across the world is like, oh, boohoo, one race.
Yep, I know. I've already had several messages saying, please stop. But we have to talk about it. We're British. We don't like early mornings. Although, Tommy, you've got grace now, so this was normal for you.
It was, yeah, pretty much. I did actually get up before her though, which is the first time in about a year. So there we go.
Fair. So anyway, the Japanese Grand Prix. That's what we're talking about today. There are some big moments, I think, from this race to chat about, but I wouldn't say there's an extensive list. Like, I don't think this is going to be our longest ever podcast.
No, it depends how much we go into certain drivers not not performing. But it's one of those ones where it wasn't the greatest race in the world. I think there was a bit of intrigue, and I think it definitely didn't feel as bad the fact that it was a two-stop. So I felt like there was stuff going on reasonably throughout the race, like quite a lot. But it's more about storylines, I guess, than racing action, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Why don't you hit me with your most memorable moment?
Well, I don't think it can be anything other than Sergio Perez and his shocking race. Really shocking. I don't think that just when you thought, surely he can't do a race this year that's worse than Monaco, and he gave it a good shot, because that was an absolute disaster. You can't blame him, in my opinion, for the first one, because that incident happened further back as well. It's a very tight turn into turn one, and a lot of cars trying to go side by side, and it was unfortunate that he had that collision. But then to be in a very, very quick car that's winning the race by a mile, and you get to come through the field in that car, should be fairly easy. Just pick your battles. And punts K-Mag, has incidents here and there. Had a very confusing incident with Lando as well, behind the VSC. Just an absolute nightmare. And then Red Bull sealed the Constructors' Championship in that race, and all anyone's going to be talking about is what a nightmare Perez had. So all he had to do was just stay out of trouble and get a all right result. But it was an absolute shocker.
It certainly was. Yeah, I'm in agreement about the first lap, first corner. I suppose that the contact with Hamilton. It's a lot of cars trying to go into a narrow piece of track into turns 1 and 2. Of course, that picked him up some damage. Then he came into the pits, and we're still wondering, is this going to be Sergio Perez drive through the field, driver of the day, get that award in the locker? He big brain thinking.
Does love it.
He's only after those. But then, has a very clumsy incident with K-Mag, which actually looked like it was going to happen the lap before as well. I think it was 1 or 2 laps before. Got very close to him in the hairpin, and you're all like, oh, God, Sergio, it's not on, especially against Kevin Magnussen. Some drivers might be scared off the road, whatever. K-Mag will turn into you no matter what. That man will defend his position for his life. Doesn't matter what car you're in. But it was so far back, it was ridiculously clumsy. It was very poor from Sergio. Smashes K-Mag round. You then have this quite funny picture of them looking like they're about to kiss. And it just such a race to forget. And then you mentioned the VSC as well. Like, I know that he had a damaged car completely. I know you're busy, Tommy, but maybe you can put that on silent.
Because my alarm, because I had an alarm today, so my phone's on.
That's fine. Oh, look, we've mentioned the time again.
Yeah, sorry.
But yeah, the VSC incident as well, which I haven't seen much clarification of right now, but I imagine it's because his car was pretty messed up. But at the same time, everyone's going at a reasonably slow delta if it's VSC, and you're just wondering, why are you in the middle of the road? If you need to get out the way, slow down to an absolute almost halt so that Lando can just fly through. There were so many little incidents that you just go, how is that all for the same driver?
Yeah, and he had the front wing problem where he kept coming in for front wing changes. The Magnussen one is so poor because He's driving a car that has unbelievable DRS, and is driving a very good car. So why he's not kind of waiting to go down the main straight, perhaps, and get a better chance? That move was never on. It was kind of the fact that, like you said, even a lap or 2 laps, whatever it was before, he saw that happen. So you had the test run of, well, that's not going to work. You need to have a big way alongside him for it to happen. And it was just clumsy. You know,
I
the
almost feel
fact
like
that,
I don't even know how much he actually wanted to go for the move, because the one previously was like really close, but he didn't look like he was actually going for the move. It just
no,
seemed as though he was taking a different line to K-Mag, because that hairpin, as much as we're all taught that you take a wide entry and then you try and clip the apex, then you go out the corner. That corner's different, where a lot of drivers don't actually hit the apex and they go very wide, whereas Perez was taking a much tighter line in, went in pretty deep, and then was like, "Oh God, maybe I need to make this move stick." Locks up and then smashes into the side of him.
yeah, it's really poor from a driver that's done, yeah, like 250 races was his last one. So he's done a lot of races to know that, it's poor racecraft from Sergio, when normally that is his thing. We bantered about driver of the day, but if he'd have punted his front wing off, which wasn't his fault at the start, and then come through the field, it's like, okay, fair enough. But it just unraveled, and just got worse and worse and worse. And then, yeah, so many moments. It was just a really embarrassing performance that is kind of, yeah, tainting his name, because we're talking about Sergio Perez like he's the worst F1 driver ever, which is just not true. Like, he's a
He's actually a
very
race
good
winner.
driver,
No.
and he was so hyped. We were there saying that he deserves that chance instead of Albon, that wasn't performing. But you got to say, in my opinion, I think he's doing worse than what Albon did now, because it's the mistakes as well. He's not even just slow. I don't think Albon made this many mistakes and errors and stuff. So I think he's being saved by the fact that the car is so good. When Albon was there, he was Max was finishing the races second and third, so it kind of made Albon look bad that he was 11th. Perez still has his moments where he finishes 11th when Max wins the race by 20 seconds. So
Yeah, and Perez is saved by the fact that Red Bull are so clear that there isn't that pressure on him. Unlike when Albon was there, Red Bull weren't dominating. They could
yeah,
get a podium or whatever, but it was a completely different story, and you saw how quickly Red Bull acted upon that. But Perez, Red Bull have won the constructors' title this weekend. Max could have literally won it on his own if he wanted to. And then the drivers will be wrapped up probably in the sprint in Qatar. And also, just to mention about the decision making from Perez, it's not like we can say, well, everyone struggled to overtake, it was just a bit of a do or die move, whatever. But we saw plenty of examples of drivers positioning their car well enough with either performance advantage or tyre advantage to get a really good run out of that hairpin, go side by side into spoon curve. There was plenty of opportunities. Even into turn one, we saw some moves. So it wasn't impossible by any stretch of the imagination. It was purely just a careless move, unfortunately, for Sergio, which, it just put curtains to his race at that point. And obviously, then eventually he retired. We'll get onto that shortly. Gavin Curley 90 comes in with, how much longer can Sergio Perez survive at Red Bull after another disaster race? Well, I'll go back to my point about it being him being saved slightly by the Red Bull performance. Obviously, he's signed for next year. I'm sure Red Bull, with the signing of Sergio for next year, believe that they will still have a reasonably large advantage into next year. And then you're kind of getting into a bit of a difficult territory, I think, from 25 onwards. If Perez has another similar season to this year, it's not good enough, because you have to act like the other teams are going to pick it up eventually. Dominance doesn't last forever. So we'll see what Perez does in 24, but I think they're going to, surely Red Bull are going to start sniffing around the Lando Norrises, of this world, to start thinking about the future for Red Bull.
yeah, you do wonder. Like, I think Perez is saved at the moment, like you say, from the fact that Verstappen can win it on his own. They're so dominant, um, and they're getting all these records, and they don't have to really worry about Perez too much. But it is getting a bit embarrassing how badly it's going for him. And I think that the problem here is, if if you did just have a clean race and he's 20, 30 seconds down the road on max, we'd go, oh well, he doesn't need to be on max's level. And actually, it's working in their favor, which we'll get onto later, because there's a lot of talk of like, you know, is it sometimes a bad thing to have two very evenly matched teammates because they're always fighting? But
Russell and Hamilton.
if so if Perez actually was just being consistent and not having these clumsy incidents, and just picking up, P2 1 race, then might be third or fourth, or but the problem is he's having these absolute calamity races where it's going spectacularly wrong, um, and it's piling so much unnecessary pressure on him, really, because we're all talking about, is he going to keep his seat when he's probably going to finish second, maybe, in the title. It's getting actually a bit close between him and Hamilton now, and you do wonder. But yeah, it's I think he's saved at the moment, but he can't afford to go into next season and do the same again, because that's when other drivers will start. They'll start thinking about, okay, we need to move on this now.
You do wonder what sort of environment Red Bull are instilling. We've spoken about it many, many times about how drivers are not given much chance before either getting the boot or whatever. You do wonder if that is something that's sort of reinforced to Perez. Is like, look, we're not expecting you to beat Max or be anywhere near him. We just need you to be finishing on the podium with a car that can win. Like, because it's a mental game. That move on Magnussen is a clear example of Perez not being in the right mind frame
Yeah,
and thinking that
definitely.
there's so much urgency there. So yeah, it's tough for Sergio because look, we've said it that he is a really good driver. He's proved himself in the past, especially in midfield teams that don't belong on the podium. And Perez was one of those drivers to deliver that constantly. He won in a blimmin' a racing point. Like it was an amazing part of his career, but he's gone to Red Bull and it just hasn't worked out the way that he wanted. Next question, P1 Patreon member Agent K. Can you shed some light on the Perez situation with him unretiring for 2 laps just to serve the penalty? Sure. Let's open up the big FIA manual. Um, it's basically allowed right now to, if you're under your own steam and you go into the pits, I'm done. Car driver gets out the car, we're retiring the car. It doesn't mean that they've like handed in a slip to the FIA and gone,
I
I'm
will
not coming to school
concede.
anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not coming in tomorrow. There's none of that. It's
It's not
it's
like a
it's like
substitute in football where you can't then come back on the pitch. Like, do you know
exactly.
what I
If you
mean?
stop on track and you can't get away from the gravel trap or whatever under your own steam, then you are out of the race. What's interesting is that the FIA seem to be clarifying this rule from here on afterwards. So that's interesting because it has been a thing that you can do this. You can leave the pits, come back out, try and score points, as you mentioned on the Twitch watch along, Tommy, in the 90s and whatnot. But and the problem I think a lot of fans have, and what doesn't sit right with me is that penalty side of it, where they can unretire the car or do whatever, tootle round, serve the penalty, which isn't then a penalty, to then get it like wiped off, and then cool, we're retired again. So I do understand fans' frustration on that side.
Uh, for me, though, it's no different to, you have an incident and normally you'd come in the pits, but you're like, you'd probably go, oh, actually, there's only a few laps left and retire. Um, and then you come into the pits, serve your penalty, so you don't get it at the next race. I know it's a very extreme version, but this is the thing. Like, it is allowed. I'm surprised they've potentially going to go back on it. There's talk that they might change that rule now, which is silly because it's such a rare incident. Um, you can't change penalties based on the circumstances. So it's just Red Bull being clever. The one example that comes to mind is like Spa, in that crazy race where everyone crashed in '98, and David Coulthard retired because his rear wing was off, and then they started fixing the car because they knew they could get him out again. It is also not too dissimilar to the incidents where a driver's crash, they get taken back to the pits, and then there's a red flag, and then the mechanics go, "We might have a bit of time here to sort something out." So um, it's just such a rare incident that it's just Red Bull being clever and getting it done. I can see why it's confusing and a bit like it's a little bit uh, loopholey, but then that's F1, and that's the kind of thing that teams will always do to get an advantage. You know, you do it with penalties all the time, where you judge that risk and reward of going for a move, or oh, we'll serve our penalty here and do an extra stop, and etc. etc. So yeah, just Red Bull being smart, but I'm surprised that they're feeling the need to clarify the situation and then sort of maybe potentially change the rules. I feel like maybe the FIA getting a bit too pressed by Twitter chat and actually should just stick to the rules.
Surely not. They're not doing this off of Twitter
Not
chat.
Twitter,
This
but
will be
like
other teams questioning it.
media
This will
and
be
yeah.
media. This yeah.
It's not like this
There
big
clearly
thing.
is.
Whereas years ago, it was just like, oh, that's a rule, okay, and then we move on with our lives.
Yeah, but I
But
suppose years ago and now modern Formula One changes, rules get clarified and so on and so forth. If they don't want people
mm,
doing this and teams and drivers moving forward, then they'll act upon it and they'll change it. I think as well they wouldn't have even done this Red Bull had Perez not retired and then been given the penalty. If he'd been given the penalty whilst he was on track, my understanding is that he was given it when he'd already retired. So then he's then going to go out there and pop in a couple of laps and off he goes again. So, but it gave us a lot of memes. So that's one thing that we were all happy with because my God, was funniest tweets littered with Perez memes. It was brilliant.
well, surely they should like give him a grid drop for the next race, and that's the penalty, rather than being like, you have a penalty now, and then he can serve it. Yeah, it's an odd one. It's that classic thing, though, isn't it, in Formula One, where this will probably never happen again,
Oh yeah,
or very very rarely. But
I
they have
reckon
to
this is
cover it,
probably
don't
where
they?
I reckon this is probably where they're like, well, this is why we investigate it after the session, everybody, so that we can give grid penalties or whatever, rather
Yeah,
than during
exactly.
the
Yeah.
race.
Oh yeah, that they
Either or.
can match their own reasoning now, can't they?
Yeah, there you go. We've been forced into a corner now. So yeah, you wanted this. So
This is
anyway,
what you wanted.
yeah, yeah. Do it during the race. Also, us. Do it after the race. So you can give the appropriate penalty.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to my most memorable moment, and of course, it has to be the man, the myth, the legend, Oscar Piastri, with his first podium of his career, and he kind of did the job that Sergio Perez should be doing in regards to his teammate. Of course, Piastri had an amazing qualifying performance, clearly getting the best out of that car over one lap. But he said this before to the media over a few other races where he's just starting or still trying to understand the tyre, particularly higher degradation tracks. Oscar Piastri just doesn't quite have the technique that Lando Norris has currently. And we saw that because Lando pulled a big old gap to his teammate in the end. And it was clear, even after being held up by Perez for 5, 6, 7 seconds with that VSC loss, he still managed to catch up to Piastri and then extend that gap by quite some margin. But that being said, Oscar did what he needed to do. He kept the Ferraris behind, he kept the Mercedes behind, and he delivered. And that will come, right? That will come with experience. The managing the tires, know how they react with certain driving styles, and so on and so forth. But yeah, his reaction made me laugh as well because he was just so cool as ice. First ever podium. I'd be screaming, crying, calling my mum. But instead, yeah, Oscar's just like, yeah, cool, thanks, guys.
Yeah, he's so chill, isn't he? He's got that kind of Kimmy energy of just so chill about everything. And
Bit
yeah,
like you, really.
I think I would be the same. I'd just be like, cool,
Do you
this is fun.
reckon?
Maybe, yeah,
You've
I am
just
that kind
scored
of
your
person.
first ever podium. Your team are going, Tom Bellingham, you are a podium sitter, or
I think I
whatever.
would. That is just my personality. I think I would be the same.
What would be your sentence?
I'd just be like, "Oh, that's cool. Awesome."
Oh, that's cool.
That's
Thank
cool.
you.
Yeah, but I do love the fact that he is like that, and he did a great job. Really happy that he got his first podium because it's been it's not a long time coming, but after Silverstone, I was so unlucky to miss out on that podium, and then he's had a very good season since then, but it's just not quite come to him. And there was a worry when like Lando passed him. I was like, oh, is it going to be um, you know is it going to be a problem that is going to get caught by Leclerc and the Mercedes and stuff? But no, did the job like you say that someone like Perez could be doing. He's finished quite a way behind his teammate, but one, he's a rookie, and two, he's kept the car in one piece and delivered the points, and that's what he needs to be doing at this stage. So awesome job from Oscar. Really pleased for him.
Me too. Question from P1 Patreon member Leon Hopkins _. With Piastri performing as well as he is, will he ever be the number one driver in McLaren, or will he and Norris become equals? Time will tell, I think, with this one, because it can develop and evolve very quickly. Just look at Ferrari, for example. Leclerc's there; he's the number one driver. Sainz enters the team, and you're like, well, he's going to be a number two unless he proves himself. Sainz starts to prove himself, and all of a sudden, that status doesn't matter. If you're faster than your teammate, they're not gonna slow you down. They're not gonna wrap a rope around you and pull you back. Like it is on merit and on performance. Right now, Lando Norris is the number one driver. He's been at McLaren. It's molded round him, and he is performing better than Piastri. At least he did this weekend. But that being said, if Oscar continues to start out qualifying Lando and is as quick as Lando, then they won't do the swap. But it was because Norris was, I don't know, half a second, maybe even more quicker a lap than Piastri that they had to make that swap. So I don't even think Oscar Piastri fans can be or can feel aggrieved. I don't think Oscar will because he was that much slower.
Is completely justifiable, the switch. I know we joked about it in the qualifying one of, oh, will they screw Oscar over? And they didn't. Obviously, Lando gets on the radio to kind of ask for it, which is fair enough because he did reel him in, and that's with the advantage that Oscar had. Um, uh, Due to the VSC, and Lando still kind of got back, but that's the experience of Lando. I think it's too early to say. I think Oscar's done exactly what McLaren need of him. He's picking up good points. He's a lot closer to Lando than Daniel Ricciardo was, and doing a really good job. And yeah, Oscar is only going to get better, like you mentioned about the experience thing. Um, he's only going to get better in the races as well. So, uh, very, very good driver lineup actually at McLaren. The fact that they've signed him on, and rightly so. Um, that's a good old lineup of. You can see why they fought for that, having Norris and Piastri, and absolutely they've made the right decision, McLaren, to put their faith in Oscar.
Absolutely. You know, he's at the start of his career. He's still learning. I think Lando's a great driver to learn from as well. Lando is one of the
Yeah,
fastest drivers on the grid. Not sure I agree with Lando saying they're the strongest driver pairing in Formula One, but they're certainly up there. And if they continue on this form and McLaren continue to deliver a great car, then what's to say that they can't win a race before the end of the year? Because Max Verstappen's the only driver that's stopping them at the
yeah,
moment.
sure is.
Anything else? Yeah,
No,
cool.
gone.
All right. Lovely, lovely, insightful. Yeah. At Marta Grabo comes with the next question. What makes Oscar faster in qualifying than Lando, but slower in the race? I feel this has happened a few times. I mean, it was marginal for Japan. Of course, he has pipped Lando a few times this year. I don't know the exact head-to-heads, Tommy. I don't know if you know. But
No, I
Lando's
mean it
definitely
isn't.
out-qualified Oscar a lot more this year.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I wouldn't
I
say that
wouldn't say it's
Oscar is
faster.
necessarily faster. Yeah, he's delivered, and it shows that he's got ice in the veins, and he doesn't bottle it under that one lap at the end of Q3. But I think Lando maybe just hasn't utilised and executed as well in those qualifying sessions where he was beaten by Oscar. Because to think, was McLaren really 0.6 of a second away from Max in one lap pace? When you look at the rest of the year, probably not. I mean, Oscar himself even said he made a mistake where he was 2 tenths up through the first sector on his final Q3 lap, then didn't improve. Lando didn't improve his last lap either. But yeah, I wouldn't say Oscar is better than Lando in qualifying, but they're definitely a lot closer than their race pace.
They're a lot more even. I think it just shows that Oscar is an incredibly quick driver and has that kind of raw speed. But like we were saying earlier, he's slower in the race because he's new, he's a rookie, he's inexperienced. And one thing we shouldn't forget is that Oscar has, come from Formula 2, uh, and they don't do as long a races as Formula One, and also had that time off as well. And you can only sort of learn the whole tire situation um, with experience. That's the one thing I think a lot of people struggle with when they move up from F2 to F1 is managing those tires, the degradation, and how best to utilize them. That seems to be the thing that is always the biggest stepping stone. And it's clear that Oscar still has to kind of find that sweet spot with it. But his improvement already has been incredibly impressive, and you can't question his speed. So he'll get there, no doubt.
So it's 12-4 to Lando in qualifying and 13-3 to Lando in the races. So
So they're actually
yeah,
not too dissimilar from
yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, Lando still has the upper hand in that particular battle,
yeah.
but yeah, Oscar's doing a great job. Next question. Ronak says, do Mercedes need to make a change in their driver lineup? It seems like having two number one drivers is causing more harm than good. I think we're getting a little bit carried away here with changing driver lineups and so on and so forth. It is similar to a Hamilton Rosberg situation. They are similarly paced. Hamilton maybe has the upper hand more often over the course of a season, but they're close enough to be tripping over each other a little bit in the races. But the thing is, the problem that Mercedes have, the majority here is the car's not good enough. If the car is Red Bull level, Hamilton and Russell are fighting for the win, and they've got both the drivers there scoring massive points. There might be the occasion, little whoops a daisy happens, and they're both out the race. Spain 2016, for example, but it hasn't happened. It's a sort of simmering point right now. It's like bubbling away, and I think there will be something eventually. Apparently, well, I saw a clip actually of Russell not even going over to speak to Hamilton when they were both getting out of the cars. Whether that was deliberate or whether that was just a case of they've just got out of the car and whatever, who knows? Read into that what you want. But no, I don't think Mercedes need to change the driver lineup. I think they've got two fantastic drivers. I would say they're probably the strongest driver lineup on the grid overall. And yeah, you will have this problem with whoever's the number one, but it's the car. The car is the problem. That's 95% of Mercedes' problems right now.
Yeah, it is. I'm still adamant that these two it is a problem when that car gets good. But dare I say it, that I do worry. Like Mercedes was so far off this weekend for Red Bull, a second slower in qualifying. It's very concerning that Hamilton doesn't have heaps of time left in his career. He can't stay around forever, and of course he's extended his contract for a couple of years. But are Mercedes going to deliver him a championship winning car in those next 2 years? It's going to be a tough ask with how clear Red Bull are and how well they're doing. And looks like Mercedes are even behind McLaren and maybe even Ferrari now in terms of their pace, or particularly on tracks like this. So at the moment, it's fine because they get a lot of points, um, and it's less extreme when a driver has to let the other one go or they're fighting and stuff. Um, if you give them to the best car, then yes, we'd be questioning um, the driver lineup, because I'm still 90% convinced, 99% convinced that they take points off each other, and Max gets the title just from even if the car isn't as good, because they just take points off each other and have these constant situations. I mean, I personally think that they put Russell on a one stop just to get him out the way, and they were scared of them continually racing each other, which does pose the question that they're not getting the maximum, are they? If they're throwing a driver with a pretty rubbish strategy just because they're scared of them racing each other, so it does cause headaches there. But God, it was good to see. I really enjoyed the battle, and it is just simmering. It's going to boil over at some point.
Yeah, it was a great battle, wasn't
Definitely,
it?
it was a really good battle.
That dive bomb from George as well into the sort of final chicane was awesome, and then Lewis got him back into turn one, and then you had the fight again. The
Around the outside
pushing
of
wide
Spoon,
of
I think,
Spoon.
yeah, it was like a less extreme version of kind of what Max did at Brazil, where they kind of run him off and Hamilton went off,
It
but
wasn't
he
anywhere
he
near as
just
bad
kept
as
on.
that.
I think he was just on the curb, but I think if that was another, I think if it wasn't his teammate, he probably would have got a penalty, but I think he got away with it with there. But
I think going around the outside of Spoon is absolutely impossible at that stage where Hamilton is slightly ahead and has the inside line and is always going to run slightly wide just through the way in which that corner
it,
works.
it was a
It
classic
was
George
it was
trying to
never
make the
on.
move,
Yeah,
just to kind of make a point.
just to then be on the team
That
radio going, "Are we going to race each other or are we going to
I
race
just
everyone else?"
Yeah, it is interesting that it's 2 races in a row now, but that it's kind of happened where they're maybe in the way of each other, but Hamilton's been the better driver this season, and got a lot more points now, but yeah, it's a shame that they basically just sacrificed Russell's strategy just to make sure that Hamilton, didn't get him, didn't like they didn't end up fighting and potentially having a crash. But what was interesting actually is the whole debate of whether what was the right call at the end, because if Russell had stayed ahead, would he have been able to fend off both of them and then just let Hamilton go at the end? I personally don't think so. I think he was a sitting duck with how far he dropped at the end. It was always going to be a struggle for him to stay ahead of both of them, and then you
Well,
run
what were
that
you saying at the
risk.
time, then, Tommy? What were you saying at the time? Go on.
So at the time, I did
Slander.
think
You're
that it
slandering.
made sense. It made sense for them to do it, and I think Anthony Davidson said the same thing, that you're kind of sealing the two cars ahead of the Ferrari, um, but I guess it does run that risk of Hamilton then being passed by Sainz as well.
Exactly, and I agree with what Mercedes decided to do because on pure pace, I don't think Sainz had enough of a delta to Hamilton in terms of an advantage that he could have probably passed Lewis on track. I think there was a 4 lap tyre difference between those two, but George obviously at the front of that queue was almost pushing them all together slightly, and that was then giving Sainz that opportunity to potentially get past. And the Mercedes, excuse me, DRS is pretty meh anyway. So it's
They've
not
not got
like,
great straight line speed, have they?
yeah, it's not like it's really something they could pull off like Sainz did in Singapore with this whole DRS trick once they did swap. But it was the right decision because Hamilton stayed ahead of Sainz and George fell off massively and ended up finishing 7.5 seconds behind Carlos Sainz in seventh. So his tyres were finished. Question: Hast to la vista. Was that the best episode of the Max Verstappen podcast this year? Of course, the Max Verstappen podcast, for those that don't know or don't follow the memes, is the cool down room because Max has had so many episodes where he is in the middle. And I love it. I love the cool down room. I will constantly say how much I love it. I just love being able to watch drivers watch the race back for the first time. It's almost like we're doing a watch along with the drivers, but the drivers are seeing it for the first time and all the noises they're making. Ooh, ah, or like when Lando watched Perez destroy Magnussen and just went, interesting, and stuff like that. Like it's brilliant. And hearing that Lando was literally watching the television whilst Piastri was fighting for P3. There's stuff like that you don't see, you don't really get to feel that sort of genuine chat between drivers because you do feel like a fly on the wall.
Yeah, you can tell that Lando is very, um, aware of the meme, shall we say? Because he was kind of acknowledging it. I think he even said, "Oh, I'm on the Max Verstappen podcast" or something at one
Oh, by
point.
the way, we're screwed. We are
Oh,
screwed. Do you
oh,
know
because
why?
Max said he hates podcasts.
Yep.
Yeah, the dream's over. Sorry, guys.
We want him on the podcast. We're trying. We've been asking the question. We'll do it anywhere. We'll go to the moon if necessary to go and film it with Mac. And then when he said I don't even like podcasts, I was like,
Oh
hopefully he
no.
means listening to them and not being part of them.
Yeah, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
But no, funny little cool down rumor. Again, they very much were aware that they were being listened to as well. And Lando is just so like off the rails with
He just
stuff.
doesn't
He
care,
just
does he?
doesn't care, does he? Which is funny.
Which is refreshing. It's nice to see
Yeah,
that side of the drivers, even though they do now know that the cool down room is one of the most highly anticipated moments of any F1 weekend.
yeah.
So yeah, it was good stuff. Great entertainment from the top three. And finally, we need to talk about the Pierre Gasly incident, which wasn't broadcast or really shown, but there were clips going around on social media where Pierre Gasly was let through by Ocon to go and attack Alonso. He didn't manage to attack or pass Alonso, and then Alpine is essentially pleading Pierre to give the position back to Esteban, to with which he then slams on the brakes before the final corner, well, just after the final corner, sorry, lets Ocon through, and then Pierre's
The
reaction
rage.
was like he'd just been told to give Esteban Ocon the world championship. It was for ninth and 10th. It was
And he's let him
absolutely
through.
mind-boggling. Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild, isn't it? Yeah, he was throwing his hands up in the air. He was
Swearing,
absolutely
like middle
fuming. Yeah.
finger.
Yeah, he was
Crazy.
throwing his arms around. It was quite something to behold, like you say, for a 10th place. The mask is slipping, isn't it? Of oh, we're okay now. We are friend, or like at least we tolerate each other. If that's his reaction to getting beaten by Ocon, well, the fact that Ocon let him go and then he's been told to give it back, and kind of that reaction shows that it's still not quite. They're definitely not over their old beef, are they? Particularly
I don't know.
Gasly.
Maybe there's something else to it. I just don't really understand why that reaction was necessary. But look, I'm sure there's reasons for it, and perhaps he will put a story out and clarify at some point because he does like putting out a little story, doesn't he, Pierre, to let everyone know exactly what's up.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I had a really itchy arm at the end, and it was I had
I mean,
to get out
fair,
the cockpit to scratch it. Something
maybe,
maybe.
and it was his middle finger that was itchy. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, let's now move on to biggest winner, whether it's a driver or team. Biggest winner. I mean, McLaren are obviously very much probably deserving of biggest winner. And there's not really any other standout
No,
performances, I would say. I mean, Max, whatever,
he does.
we
This
know
is
what
what
he
he
can
does.
do. But as a winner, someone that is impressed, I think definitely McLaren is. I would say Piastri, but I don't think Piastri's performance actually was biggest winner. I think McLaren as
No.
a whole and the performance they've shown uh, looks really good for both this weekend and also in a couple of weeks in Qatar.
Yeah, it's got to be McLaren. They executed the perfect race. Obviously, was always going to lock out that P1, so the best they could hope for was a 2-3, and they executed it perfectly. Even to the point where they made the not tough call, but the right call in allowing Norris through as well, just to maximise the result. And great job from McLaren. I mean, we're kind of used to it now because of Silverstone, but it really does. You really do have to think back to the start of the year and think like, what an unbelievable turnaround it is.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's absolutely mind-boggling to think how McLaren have moved forward from Bahrain. If I load up the results, you had Lando finishing 2 laps down and Oscar Piastri DNF. That wasn't obviously purely on speed.
Mm.
Saudi Arabia, Lando Norris finished 17th, 86.4 seconds off the win. Oscar Piastri finished 15th, 85 seconds off. Like that
Yeah.
is miraculous.
Without
From
Max, they've
those.
literally gone from back markers to like race winners, which is
Yeah, started from
insane.
the bottom. Now they're there. Love it.
Yeah.
So well done, McLaren, for biggest winner. Biggest loser. There's quite a few biggest losers this weekend. Alfa Romeo being one, Williams being another. Sergio Perez, I think, probably takes the biscuit. I think yeah.
Yeah,
I think Checo. I think Checo's biggest
it's
loser this
got to
weekend.
be Checo with how bad his race went, but Williams maybe.
Logan's very much up there as well. We haven't even spoken about Logan's dive
Well, the
bomb on
fact that
Bottas.
he
Well, it
crashed
wasn't even a dive
again.
bomb. He was trying to defend and then just locked up and smashed the life out of Bottas and crashed in qualifying. Oh, maybe it's
Yes,
Logan.
I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, I do think you could argue maybe Logan, just the fact that his seat is
He's
surely
probably lost
hanging
his
by a
seat as well.
thread now.
I saw something going around now that apparently Felipe Drugovich has opened up contract talks to potentially race for Williams next year, which I think would be a very strange move from Williams. But
I mean, I mean, he's a
not in a bad way, but I
champion,
mean, Liam
like,
Lawson's there.
and
Unless he
has
is
the
literally
experience.
unavailable,
Yeah, true. We never actually got to see Drugovich how he did, because Stroll came back even with a broken hand, didn't he, for Bahrain? So, I mean, it's a better choice than Logan, but it'd be interesting. I imagine every single driver without a seat is knocking on James Vowles' door right now, because surely Sargent's contract is yeah,
I did
almost
enjoy
ripped.
your tweet as well. Really good from you.
Which one?
Was it Nicholas Latifi could
Walk
Nicholas
so
Latifi
Logan could
walked
run.
so Logan could run? I mean, it's so strange how Logan is literally fitting into that Latifi role now. It's mad.
Yeah, big
Um,
time, if not
but yeah,
more.
I think biggest loser actually probably to Logan Sargent because he's potentially lost his seat off the back of that. I don't know. We'll see.
Mm.
Right, let's now reflect on our predictions that we made on Wednesday and see how we have done. First and foremost, biggest good surprise. I went for Hulkenberg, and that did not work out, but he beat K-Mag. So well done, Hulk. Biggest good surprise.
I went for Charles Leclerc, and
Nah,
it's not.
not even
No,
on the
I
podium,
can't
is he?
even. Yeah, it's not. It's not a big enough surprise. Like, if he'd got on the podium, I might have been able to argue it. But
Yeah,
obviously, said that I think he'd have the upper hand on science, which he did. But it's not like,
didn't phrase it
oh
that way,
my
did you?
god, wow, yeah, not
Right,
like
some guy.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Biggest flop. I went for Signs. No, it's not. It's
no.
not floppy. He got beaten by Charles, but yeah, sixth place is not flop by any stretch.
And I went for Magnussen, who did
I
finish
mean,
last, but when there's drivers
his
punting each other out, he's not the one that's
it
made a
has to a
mistake.
3-stop as well. Like they were so washed. It's
Yeah,
frightening. Like what are they doing with their?
I mean, Magnussen's finished last, but when you have drives like Sargent's
Oh no!
and
So Magnussen did a
Perez's,
2-stop. Hulkenberg did a 3-stop. 8 laps on the softs, then another 13 on the mediums, then another
so
16 on the hards,
Hulkenberg did
and
a
then 15 on the
better,
mediums.
did an extra stop and still beat Magnussen. So biggest flop.
Don't you
Magnussen.
dare! Don't you
Although then
dare!
you'd get
No.
biggest surprise for Hulk.
Yeah,
So it doesn't matter. We
it
both got
equals out either
nothing.
way. I
Yeah.
think it's a
Okay.
0. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, we're now going to pole position. I went for Max Verstappen. Thank you very much. 1 point.
How
Cheers.
how the turntables. I've gone for Leclerc, and no.
That did not happen. Now we go to our top 3 in
Just
first
get it all
place.
done. Yeah, just get
In
it. Go on.
first place, I went for Max Verstappen. 1 point. What did you go for,
Just
Tommy?
go for
No.
your.
No. I'm gonna savor this. I'm gonna squeeze every droplet out of this segment.
Okay, I went for Max Verstappen as well. 1 point.
In second place, I went for Lando Norris. 1 point.
I've got to go, I'm afraid. Sorry. No, I went for Leclerc. No points.
And third place, I went for Piastri.
You
1
got
point.
the big 3. You got the big
That's
3.
unreal. Right, I now need to speak to you. Wait, no, you said third place, Norris, right? It says 0.
Yeah. So 0.
No points for that.
Go on.
I'm now gonna put something. Okay.
No, you're not getting an extra point because you.
Listen.
I know you too.
Top
well.
5.
I knew
top
what you.
5.
I knew what you were going to say. No.
People have suggested this, and I
No.
think it needs to go to the YouTube comments. It needs to go to the YouTube comments. I got the top 5 correct for the pre-race predictions. I said Verstappen, Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, Hamilton. Do I get a bonus point for that? And for the foreseeable, if you get it right as well, you also get a point. I think that's fair.
I don't, because you've already got a lot of points this week.
Right, we're taking it to the YouTube comments. Please let me know, please, and then upvote things that say yes. Don't upvote things that say no. I want to see if I get a bonus point. I got the top 5 right. That is unreal from me. I wheel knowledged this week, and I'm very happy about it, as you can tell.
I can tell, but alas, it's not a point.
He's so angry. No, well, we'll see. We'll see what the YouTube comments say. And finally, our one crazy prediction. I said Leclerc beats Carlos Sainz, which he has after 3 races of not doing it. So come on the me. That sounds weird. And you, Tommy?
I said Liam Lawson in the points, and no, P11. What AlphaTauri love a P11? Can they just like actually score points?
I think they don't understand what the point system is. Maybe they think it's the top 11 that get points or something.
Yeah, and they're just constantly like, yes, we've won the
They've got
second
like the
half.
Pit board up. They got the pit board up that says P11. Come on.
Yeah, with their hand over the other one, going P1. Yeah,
P1 for both of our drivers.
Yeah.
God. So yeah, 0 points for you, unfortunately, Tommy. So that's 5 for me this week and 1 for you. Oh, we are Michael Masseying this championship beautifully.
Actually, you do the next bit, and I'm going to go just check because I'm pretty sure I was 4 ahead, so we might be equal now.
Wow, love it. Right, we'll go to our crazy predictions from you wonderful lot. First and foremost, Dan, the United fan, said Stroll top 6. I am sorry to let you know that did not happen. Quadrado Manuela, Leclerc return to the podium. Nope. And Nord, 1 Red Bull, 1 Ferrari, 1 Merc, DNF. No. So that is that. 0 points for the listeners, unfortunately, for you lot. And Tommy, have you got the results of where we currently stand?
After many rounds, I don't even know what round we're on. Matt Gallagher, 45 points. Tom Bellingham, 44 points. He's taken back the lead with a big old score.
And I might be getting another one if the YouTube comments say enough yeses and upvotes. Please help.
Just think about the championship. Come on.
No, I want to win this now. You were a scumbag doing the Max Verstappen pole position streak that you had, but fair play to you. No, good strategies.
Speaking of Michael Massey, did you see the thing I tweeted about it being in that random video where someone was just some like Australian YouTuber or whatever was just going around Sydney asking people about kebabs, and of all the people to walk past was Michael Massey, and he just obviously was like, "Oh God, no, a camera!" And a guy's scarred, clearly thought he was going to be asked about Abu Dhabi or something.
Yeah, fair.
And had no time for kebabs. So yeah.
Unbelievable. What a way to end, eh? Well, that is it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this wonderful post-race podcast. Remember, our Patreon is now live if you want to have some more exclusive content from us, including classic races, early access to live events, a private Discord where me and Tommy are constantly chatting to you guys. We've got more podcasts as well, exclusive podcasts, ad-free listening, so many benefits. If you want to come and join that, please check out patreon.com/MattP1Tommy. And Tommy, what are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts are that I need to brush up on my wheel knowledge because I'm fuming about those predictions and how the championship is slipping from my grasp after my incredible strategy of picking Verstappen every week. And I've just what was I thinking?
And then you started picking Leclerc. Like, I love it, Tommy. I've got a Ferrari 2019 engine in me right now, and I am flying. So let's see how that ends. But we'll see you very soon. Tomorrow, of course, for our driver ratings and lots more content, even though it is an off week next week. Don't you worry. We've got Daniel Ricciardo coming out this week as well. The second video we did with him, a distraction challenge. So look forward to that. And we'll see you very soon. Bye.
Bye.